From our armchairs, armed with opinions, this is Behind the Bots, the podcast that brings you the stories of the builders behind BattleBots. I'm Chris.
I'm Luke.
I'm Lindsay.
Kyle's gone!
Roll the intro.
Kyle.
Let's try again. Let's go. Let's try again.
No, that's perfect.
There's no try again. Okay?
Kyle was the friends we made along the way.
Oh dear.
And today on the podcast, our first crossover episode with our friends from RoboCast.
Yes. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Samuel64, and welcome to the RoboCast and not Behind the Bots. I'm joined with Steve the AmericanKilljoy and World of Woodrow. And of course, we are actually joined by all of Behind the Bots, Luke, Lindsay, Chris, and Kyle. Welcome, guys. A crossover that probably no one asked for, but we're having it anyway, right?
We
I'm
asked
so excited
for
about
it.
this.
We're
so stoked about this.
Me too. I'm honestly so excited for this. What a couple weeks since the end of BattleBots, right? It's just been a bit of a whirlwind.
That's the way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of discussed this ourselves a little bit before kind of agreeing to record this, and we were all kind of just like, not sick of what was being said, but like, for the want of a better word, we were, because it was pretty bad. It was pretty
I went on
bad.
vacation.
You did?
I had to clear my
I
head.
too was on vacation, but still managed to watch the episode and managed to get caught up in the heated debates, let's call them that, regarding what went on at the end of the season specifically. But yeah, for my 2 cents, I think that judge's decision fine, audience reaction not.
Oh yeah, you weren't here, were you, Jeff? You were busy. You were
I was.
You were busy being David.
I was in the US.
You were.
Mm-hmm.
How was that?
Oh yeah, no, I was replaced by David. Yeah,
Yeah.
we actually share a body. And
okay.
we phase in and out of each person, so it's
And that's how Lego Wars is made, everyone.
Oy, oy, oy.
Guys, I want to come to you all a bit quickly because, you know, very similar to us, you know, you kind of just, you interviewed the same people we did at the end of the season. It was the lovely people from Tantrum and Blip, and, you know, when we spoke to them, Ginger was, you know, very clear about how she felt after the final, because what was sent to them and other teams was pretty unacceptable, and it kind of got us thinking, you know, what is wrong with BattleBots? I want to kind of bring you guys in here. What did you guys think of the reaction, really?
I can say as an admin on the Facebook group that what you guys actually saw on the internet was not nearly as bad as what we denied. And yeah, it got pretty nasty there for about 2 or 3 days. Then it started to kind of wind down a little bit. But yeah, it has been an intense post season so far. What do you think?
Yeah, I from my perspective, it's on BattleBots to present the fight fairly and evenly and to give people context without having them have to go to the internet to trying to figure out all of the extra context. And they're ultimately responsible for how people react to it because of how they edited the episode and what they left on the cutting room floor. So we have to believe that either one of two things is true, that they cut the episode in a particular way because they wanted people to be outraged, or they cut the episode in a particular way and had no idea that people were going to be outraged. So either they are malicious or incompetent, and neither is really great. So would love to see BattleBots do better for season 7.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the general consensus, isn't it, really? Like, it's just unfortunate that what should have been like the cream of the cake, if you like, at the end of the season ended up being quite negative. And I think, you know, I've spoken to other teams that weren't even involved.
It wasn't really a cherry on top, and you don't want to know what it was.
Yeah, it was something else entirely. It was.
I have heard rumour that they were put between a rock and a hard place, actually, at filming in the sequence of events for the most controversial moment of the episode, in that certain rules weren't followed because production got in the way more than BattleBots themselves, which is tough. And then that leaves them in a situation in which, you know, what do you do from there, and where do you go? I think what needs to happen going forwards is the people that are in charge of making sure that rules are stuck to stick to them. We'll get into all that a little bit later.
So you think it falls more on Whale Rock than BattleBots themselves?
I think there is a certain amount of Whale Rock that we need to look at and place some of the blame with.
Yeah, like, are we trying to make a TV show? Or are we trying to make synthetic drama? Trying to get clicks, which, I mean, that's the internet way. I mean, look at us right now. We're doing this right now. So
I'll be honest, I was surprised that the most controversial moment hasn't yet hit the YouTube channel or anything yet. For the maximum viewership they could possibly get out of it.
I mean, shoot, they delayed the AMAs for both the judges and for the teams. Everything was too hot, and we had to wait for things to cool, and things have cooled down a bit.
Bizarre that they'd originally scheduled the judges AMA and the Witch Doctor AMA within 2 days of each other, just to go have fun.
It's just tone deaf.
Good luck with that one, guys. You know?
I think that's been made abundantly clear that there's just talks that need to be had and say, hey, this is something that can never happen again.
Yeah. Well, with all that said, both us and Behind the Bots put out a post within the last week or so saying, what do you guys think? What do you guys think we can do, or BattleBots can do themselves, to fix the show? Should we go through some of them? What do you reckon, guys?
Yes, please. Right,
so we'll try and segment it into like kind of different areas and topics, and see, just to kind of give a bit of segmentation, if you like, to our thoughts and kind of general feelings, basically. We'll start off with the first section, which very kindly has been provided by the Behind the Bots guys. It's a nice, really long script of questions. It's great. It's been so nicely put together, which is something we never ever do. So thank you very much for doing that. The first section is making things better for the builders. Why don't we start off with take it away, guys. We'll start off with the first section.
I mean, we got a lot of suggestions around paying the builders. And I mean, for me personally, like, control and compensation come back to just the core of a lot of the challenges that are inherent inside of BattleBots. I'll read the suggestion here in a second, but like, we had feedback after our season finale episode from a listener who said, I don't care whether the builders get paid or not. I just want to see fights, and I want to see more fights, and I want to see more destructive fights, and I don't care, and like, for me, it was like, pay is crucial to that, because I feel different watching two millionaires fighting in the UFC versus seeing two strangers who are paid nothing to fight on the street. Like, one feels icky, the other feels fair. So yeah, like, first kind of bucket is around paying the builders. We heard about this from Alexander Archer, Mike Rubino, and Eddie Friend. Eddie says the builders should be allowed to get sponsorship from Discovery sponsors. So like, if Chevrolet or whatever, sponsors Discovery, Chevrolet should also have a shot at sponsoring a BattleBot. We also got this great quote from Adam Connis, who writes, "Showing up is the real challenge, and builders should be rewarded for it. Motorsports runs on sponsorship, but my understanding is that sponsorship is highly limited by the Discovery Channel, which is a bad situation for builders. This needs to change for builders to flourish, and by extension, the sport to flourish. All sports run on sponsorship money, and BattleBots doesn't play that game well." All right, so what are your thoughts on builder pay?
First and foremost, I think we need to address, is this a sport? And if it is, which I think BattleBots are pushing for, you pay sports people to play their sports. In professional sporting competitions and legitimate sporting competitions, a phrase coined by the Spinnerproof podcast, this is a legitimate sporting competition, or they're trying to make it that. And if that's the case, you need to pay your sports people. In terms of sponsors, I've very recently got into Monster Jam, and they have some pretty damn big sponsors. I mean, there's a whole truck sponsored by Bakugan, which is a massive toy company, and Monster Jam has been a successful sport for 40 years, or monster truck racing in general. The biggest truck there, Gravedigger, 40th anniversary this year. It wouldn't have survived that long had it not been for their sponsors.
It's difficult because, you know, even down to the logo of BattleBots, like, you know, it's now very similar to a lot of other big sporting companies in the US, like, you know, MLB or NBA or anything. Like, the red and the blue is kind of synonymous with, like, every single sporting league. And
except the NHL for some reason.
I don't know, you know.
That's
black and blue. That's black and blue.
Yeah. Okay. But you get what I mean? Like, it's kind of leaning into that a little bit, and kind of, you know, the way that the show is now presented with, you know, the back behind the scenes pit reporter previously with Jenny, and, you know, you got a technical analyst now in Pete Abramson. You've got the color commentator and the kind of, you know, the play-by-play. For me, if you're gonna try and bill it as the, you know, a sporting competition, which, you know, they do, they have a regular season and they have the postseason tournament, just like a lot of other competitions do. For me, it just kind of, they need to have some kind of balance, and I get it's a TV show, and it is, you know, it's an entertainment show first and foremost. It is, because that's how you get an audience, with, you know, trying to entertain people and say, hey, look at these engineers fighting with their, you know, things they've made in their garage or whatever. It's kind of a hard sell, whereas, you know, that's the thing.
Part of the reason why Robot Wars didn't succeed, because, you know, they tried to put it as a sort of more factual, buildery type show than a sports show of fighting robots, and I think the focus for BattleBots is definitely on the fighting robots.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if I'm happy with that or not, but that is the angle they're taking with it. So,
yeah,
jumping back to, you know, what you were just talking about, you know, connecting it with other major sports leagues. Not only, to your point, yes, they pay every single player in the MLB a league minimum salary, but additionally, teams have caps of how much they are able to spend. And if you want to spend more than that on your team, you have to pay a luxury tax, which goes to funding other parts of the league and helping bolster some of the other teams that have, like, literally the smallest amount of dollars. So that's their way to kind of tip the scales back towards the center, so that you have, you know, an actual exciting you know, season, as opposed to just one team absolutely able to crush and dominate all of the other teams. And, you know, I think that they could stand to benefit from looking at that model, especially if they wanted to be ever taken, you know, seriously, to the point of people able to, you know, bet their own dollars on the sport. I'd imagine that's one of the reasons why they're located in Las Vegas now, because they want to bring in that legitimacy side of the sports, you know, field of view. So they're going to have to figure out what's the formula here that we can make this more even, and that we can make this more real, so that actual dollars can be, you know, voted in on bots.
Yeah, definitely. And it's huge. It's a huge. Go ahead, Lindsay. I saw you were starting to say something.
No. Finish your point.
Okay. But yeah, that's a huge part of it. There's a fact of, like, large market teams dominating smaller market teams because of the fact that they can bring in so much talent and they have so much more money to play with. So that's very important to talk about. Speaking of money, Discovery and Warner Media just had a $43 billion merger back in March. So we'll be interested to see how that affects the show going forward, if they're going to go back and look at their programming and say, hey, these shows this shows that. So we'll see how money shakes out, but that's just something to kind of keep in mind as we go forward. Would season 7 be the last one? We'll see. Maybe they move to a live format where they travel, similar to how Robots Live over in the UK does in Extreme Robots, and the way that works. We'll get later. There's later questions in the script here that are very interesting going forward. I think back in the day we had the Robot Fighting League back in the States, and I really didn't think that had enough.
Like time given to it, sort of thing.
It didn't have enough spread promotion. It seemed like an underground tournament. So it'd be nice to have something like BattleBots to be like, hey, that we can have this and have this live, because that's another thing with betting. It's very hard to bet on something that's pre-filmed. So without people, you know, blurting out all the answers. So I mean, in any case, I'll leave it at that while we continue. So I'm sure more thoughts will come as we get to later topics.
I think also, you know, thinking about paying builders, I don't know that they are going into this expecting it right now to be their living the way that, like, it is for major league, you know, baseball players or whatever. But I do think, like, it's not fair for them to have to invest $80,000, $100,000, $150,000 of their own money so then they can participate in a show that makes other people money. Like that, I think, is at the core of what builders are asking for right now. If this thing ever became more than a TV show, became a real league, became a traveling thing, whatever, like I think at that point they should be expecting more of like a salary or more of like a steady income from something like this. But like at the very least, they should not be having to go into debt and like forego being able to put a deposit on a house because they are building a robot for a TV show. And I think like fundamentally that is what makes me the most frustrated about this whole thing. And I just refuse to believe that there is no avenue to have like for the show to allow them to recoup that money. I think
there must be a way around it somewhere, right? Like there's surely some compromise that can be made like along the way. Like I've often wondered like whether, you know, I know recently within the last couple of years, you know, sports like Formula One have introduced a cost cap where you have a set limit on how much you can spend. Like, but the only issue with that I'd think with fighting robots is material wise, you can say, oh yeah, you have a hard limit, you can spend this much, but then what about machining hours? What about time off work?
Right.
Where does that kind of fit into that kind of thing? You know, it's difficult to kind of quantify, you know, your time basically. That's the other factor I think with payment. It's tough. There's no, you know, if there was a silver bullet, we'd all have the answer, right? And we'd all be paid a lot of money by Discovery to make it happen for BattleBots, but we don't know. It's a lot to discuss, and yeah, it's interesting for me. Like there's no tangible like idea at the moment where I'm like, okay, this is the right answer because, you know, as I said, someone would have already done it by now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the production is so small at BattleBots, like the number of full-time employees, that they're so focused on getting this created and getting it out the door, and they don't have time to like dedicate to something like figuring out how to make it equitable for builders. But I think if they want to make this something bigger than it is, they need to like open it up beyond just like their childhood friends and family and make it into like a legitimate, you know, production company and or more than the production company, just like an organization to kind of figure out these other components, because it's not sustainable otherwise.
Yeah. Like for me, cost and control are very closely tied together. So if you think of them as a reality show, you say, okay, well, the reality show has producers and they pick which people are going to go into the reality show. It's a 2-week show. Nobody gets paid because they're just doing it for exposure, but it also doesn't cost anything. I take 2 weeks off of work and get flown out to LA, right? So like my total outlay is a little bit of time and basically no money. But BattleBots doesn't do that because they say, hey, you can't bring like an end game clone from Germany, right? That is really amazing. It's going to definitely win. How about you build like a robot that's shaped like a spider and it like shoots silly string out of its butt, right? And then you go, okay, I'm definitely going to get destroyed in like the qualifiers, and I'm just going to give you $10,000 of my family's money, right? And you've told me not to build something competitive because I can't build what I want to build. So like either don't pay the builders and allow them to build whatever they want, or pay the builders because you're telling them what to build, right?
Mm-hmm. You can't have your cake and eat it too, right?
Yeah. And the show only exists because the builders. If the builders were not here, there would be no show. And the builders, those special 80 teams, literally have created this multi-million-dollar show that gets put on every single year and Discovery sells ads against and all of it. And without the builders, you know, like they determine the entire show, and they are the ones who are propping it up. And they're really just getting the short end of the financial stick, which really sucks. Yeah. We have like 39 other suggestions.
I know.
We gotta like run through these.
It's gonna be a long one, boys.
But the thing is, I think this is like probably the most.
That's
important
a really
topic
important one
because this is kind of, as you mentioned, there is no show without the teams.
Nope.
And you know, ultimately, I feel like this is the one that a lot of people, you know, we've seen a lot of teams come out. You know, most notably, Paul Ventimiglia is not coming to BattleBots because he doesn't think it's fair for all the builders. He said as much, you know, he said as soon as it's more equitable, then he'll come back. But because
all builders, not just for him.
exactly,
as well.
which is really good to see. You know, it's not just him saying, "Okay, I want more money." It's, no, everyone.
Because
should
I'm
have more money.
I'm the high talent here. Everyone else, no.
Yeah, that's
Even playing field.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to ask Kyle if there's anything to add, but I dread to think how long it's going to take for him to respond.
Is Kyle even here?
I see him here.
Oh my god.
Oh, I'm
Kyle.
100% here. Yes. How are you doing?
Anything to add to that?
No, I think you guys pretty much covered it. I did think while Lindsay was talking about how BattleBots should increase their production because right now they're a little bit too small, I did find it funny that there were so many conspiracy theories floating around from a lot of the fans and even some of the builders about, the fix being in the last episode and during the finals. And they're just trying to get this show up. They're just trying to make sure that robots are in the box and they're not wasting TV time and TV money. They really don't have time for anything right now, much less conspiracy theories. So,
$1,000
$1,000
a minute in a box.
If nothing else, they should increase their production team just so they can, run massive conspiracy theories in the final. I think that would be great.
I do love the
Don't
fact
get the
that
comment warriors started, Kyle. Come on now.
6 seasons into the reboot of this show, we've already had 5 seasons before, 6 new seasons, international robot competitions everywhere, and there are still people who believe this is all fixed and the champions are predetermined. This isn't classic Robot Wars, and even then that wasn't predetermined. It was messy.
How about the theory that they don't actually put the robots in the arena and it's little RC cars instead, but they just
it's all holograms. It's the Charlie Dangerfield.
That's my favorite one.
It's all holograms.
I like the comments I've seen recently about it being CGI, all the sparks. I think that's a great one.
All the sparks are CGI. None of it is real. Everything is fake.
Okay, let's move on.
Especially Kenny. Kenny's a robot.
The arena is not flat; it's round.
Yep.
Oh, I'm here for round arena theory. This is great.
It sounds like the next section of.
Reddit's going to go crazy. Yep,
love it.
Let's move on to reducing toxicity in the fandom. This is much more of a philosophical question, really. It's kind of hard to kind of.
How do you put a muzzle on millions of people?
Yeah,
you can't.
Do you like this show? Good. Shut up.
It's hard, right? Because in every single sporting event in the world, there is a vocal minority that is always going to be upset when their favourites don't win.
Yep.
I'm sure there were people that were gutted that Witch Doctor didn't win the final. There were those that were disappointed they were there, and so on and so forth. Guys, I know this coming from someone who, enjoyed Robot Wars, coming back. It was amazing to see it come back. And a lot of people were really upset with the way that ended. And just love it for what it is. Ultimately, there's, you can't change it sat at home, ultimately. Unless you build a competitive tournament-winning machine and, stomp the field. There is no way you're going to change what is in front of you, unfortunately.
I do think that there is some things that BattleBots could do to help reduce the toxicity. We're never going to get rid of it, but
no.
As we've said previously in this recording, is clarity, being crystal clear with the audience, maybe having segments to explain how they do certain bits of production would help out a lot. We said going online to try and find these things out is never helpful. BattleBots has the full rulebook, builder's guide, everything up on their website. Nobody's going looking for it because nobody knows it's there.
Apart from us.
Apart from us, yeah. The hardcore fans will go and read through and go, look, it says it here. Yeah. But, nobody else is going to. The biggest thing they could do to help is to make sure that the audience knows why things are happening. They've started to do that, I think, this season by showing the judges' scorecards. But they need to be explaining what that means in terms of the judging criteria as well, in simple terms that people will understand. An idiot's guide to BattleBots, if you will.
It's funny, Jevin, because and I think back in the classic era. Remember when they used to cut to Bill Nye and used to be like, "Oh, these are the kinds of weapons you can't use explosives, no entanglement, this, that, and the other."
The amount of people are still saying, "I want to put an EMP on my robot." It is that easy just to kind of highlight, hey, you can't do this. That'd be a great Pete section. Hey, you could do this, and this, but you can't do this.
It's funny, actually, Steve, you've said that because I have seen comments of bring back Bill Nye. for BattleBots, and I think, you know what, people want this sort of segment. I don't know whether people just want Bill Nye there because he's such a great meme, but he provided something important to the show back in the day, and it's something that they need to really get Pete doing. I do think that
Pete had too much. He had too much on his plate.
He apparently always has too much. He has like 3 days to go around the pits and check in with everyone, and then they announce the draw, and he has to go around everyone again because everything has changed. They need 2 Petes. Is basically the consensus, because there needs to be an on-camera Pete and then also a Pete going around the pits, going, "What are you doing? How do you do it? What are you going to do for this fight?" etc. But you know. Another point that will come up a lot, I'm sure, is communication, because if you're going to do that, those 2 people need to then be communicating for on-screen talks and pits talks and making sure that they're getting it all right. It's the same with the reffing, it's the same with production and builders, it's the same with production and the audience. Communication is key, and you've just got to have good talking.
Now, something that that the production would point out there is this is all about money too, right? Like, having another Pete back there running around, that costs time, that costs money. Running those segments costs time and costs money, and it makes the Alaskan, what did you say, Luke? It was the Alaskan truckers, mouth breathers, upset. Yeah, upset because there's not robots making each other go boom on their screens for 3 seconds or 4 seconds or whatever during the show. They want 9 fights a show. You know, we're getting 7 or 8. That's not enough for them. They need more. So that's a tough proposition. Maybe it really does come down to just a better produced YouTube product where they are getting that information out there for more people, right?
For people who are interested to go out of their way and look at things and want to say, "Hey, I want to learn about this."
Maybe even just. That's a very good point.
It's not. Don't worry. The names are hidden. Don't worry.
The number's not.
No, it will be. Don't worry.
Oh, well, let me read it out quickly. No, I do think that if they are going to put it all on YouTube, and it's a fantastic idea, then they should advertise it like they were doing for the... and you can go and fill in your own bracket by going to this website. You can go and check out the judge's decision and all of the rules around it by going to this website, or go and check out this video. I mean, back in 2018, just before we had the 5-way rumble, that sparked massive controversy, they put out a video explaining the rules on rumbles. Yeah,
because they knew it was coming.
Yeah, I mean, it made us all incredibly worried for good reason, but it explained what happened in that fight perfectly. And YouTube is the biggest audience you're going to get outside of the main broadcast.
Yeah, I think that covers toxicity quite well. It's kind of hard to quantify. It's more of a... People just need to stop being assholes, basically. Sorry if you need to bleep that, but it's just...
It's just like enjoy it for what it is. Like, why can't we just be happy for everybody? Why does it matter necessarily like who takes home the giant nut? It's like the show is so much more than that. And there's like incredible engineering in all of the bots in the top 32, top 8, like the top 4. We should be excited that there is like a diverse spread of robots in. We had, the flipper, we had, tantrums like a puncher. Like, we should be so happy that this was like a diverse year rather than mad because our favorite didn't win. Like, get a new favorite. They're all great.
We said constantly throughout when the 32 was announced, we said with Pete Abramson that any of the 32 could have been champion. Any one of them. Yeah. And actually outside of that 32, it was such a strong lineup this season. I think what people forget a lot is that also these robots are run by actual human beings and you need to treat them as such. So yeah, please remember that.
I think one of the reasons why the toxicity is able to be so potent here in combat robotics is because the builders are so accessible and they're part of the fandom.
Yeah.
Right? Some of the biggest fans of the sport participate in the sport. And so they're right there shoulder to shoulder with some of those people who will, spit vitriol out into the airwaves online and on Reddit, and they're there. They're there front and center. Now, if I was to lob an insult at a star NBA player, they don't care. They're going to hop in their helicopter and they're going to go to the restaurant they want to go to tonight, and then they're going to go house shopping. And they don't care what I have to say. But these are the people that are putting up their time, their money, their energy. They're building the sport and carrying it on their own shoulders. And then they have to stand side by side with those same people that are telling them that their bot sucks, or, you know, put a gun on it, or, you know, whatever. And it sucks.
We've had that already with Brutus.
Yeah, Brutus. Yeah. I think we are in a privileged position, us here on recording, in that we, out of most, get to talk face to face with both builders and audience. These podcasts are the middle ground, and this is where you hear the actual talking with them behind the bots. You talk about the builders outside of a building scenario. We talk to them about what's gone on in the matches, as well as you do as well. It's a real privilege to actually get to do that, but it also means that we have to be the ones to, you know, make sure that the audience hear it too, which I think is nice, because we do that quite nicely, I think. I'm not sure I had a point to that whole thing, but I thought it was worth saying.
It's another thing as well, because, you know, Chris, you mentioning, you know, talking to an NBA player, like, for example, they will all have, like, social media teams that look after their accounts as well, and they'll be, you know, they'll have loads of filters of, you know, you'll see a message if it's good, or, like, you'll see a message if it's meant to be seen. These teams, they just do it for the fun of it. They run these accounts off their back. They, you know, as I said, very accessible through, you know, various social medias. They're going to see everything, because they can't, you know, they're not going to pay someone to run their social media for them, because it's their, you know, it's their thing at the end of the day, isn't it? So
we've seen quite a lot of builders over the years quit social media because of it, and I think that's wrong.
Yep.
Just wrong.
Absolutely. Should we talk about some rules?
Oh. Sure.
They're made to be broken. No.
Why don't you guys take us away with the start of the people and rules section?
Yeah, I think we could probably combine some of these.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just generally talking about judging, judges, and criteria. Mm-hmm. So, you know, currently it's 5 points for damage, 3 points for control, 3 points for aggression. There was some talk about changing those around. A couple of people said that aggression should be, you know, given more weight than damage, which I think is an interesting idea.
Modern Robot Wars spec, that would be. And I think a lot of the judges' decisions in Modern Robot Wars were pretty on point. Aggression outweighed damage and control. It's an interesting one.
Yeah. Some like ideas around, let's add more judges, you know, let's really stuff the bench with 5, maybe 7 judges. Some people said, you know, we have 3 judges. Each judge should focus on a specific category, you know, instead of asking 3 people to see all 3 categories at the same time. And, you know, other people said we should rotate the judges so that we always have kind of this fresh look. You know, obviously there's a couple of people who would just love to fire the judges and bring in new judges. So I guess just in general, judging criteria, judges as people, number of judges, our thoughts there. And listen, we can say what's happening right now is totally fine too. I mean, these suggestions, you know, not all of them are good, Sam. All right.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think the one of the biggest issues again is communication between judges and the audience, in that people don't know how judges' decisions work properly. Like, none of us really know what's going through the judges' heads. It's been interesting watching back. BattleBots 2018 has been broadcasting alongside the end of this season. Is broadcasting every day, 7 p.m. GMT on ITV4. I'll plug you. And the interesting thing
it's
is
actually BST, by the way, not GMT.
Oh, yeah, that. Fine, I forgot. Time zones are horrible. They did rotate some of the judges in 2018, and the biggest crime, I think, happened in the episode that was on yesterday, where it was a decision between Yeti and Bombshell, and one of the judges just says, one of them was still moving at the end of the match, so I gave them the win. It's like, you've got a whole set of criteria. You use them, you fool. It's frustrating. I quite like the idea of one judge looking at one criteria. because that way you get consistent judging of that criteria all the way through the season. It might mean that it's horribly skewed one way for the entirety of a season, but at least it's consistent.
I'm going to throw something out there. I don't think there have been any bad decisions this year. Like, you can argue the Tantrum Hydra one was, like, the closest one, and, you know, even they thought that they lost, you know, the Tantrum team thought they lost. But by the criteria, Tantrum wins the fight, because also, it's difficult as well, because when you look at the criteria as it is written currently, damage carries the most weight, and I feel like it will just have to stay that way, because ultimately BattleBots is a TV show, and damage is kind of the thing that the people look for. You know, you want to see Ghost Raptor get split into 5 million pieces. You know, a good control match, you know, like Defender versus Retrograde, was it? Where that got highlighted onto YouTube, and it was no damage in the fight, but it was a good driving fight. That was highlighted because the eyeballs just don't get drawn to it as much as Ghost Raptor getting blown to pieces.
Whiplash didn't have a weapon. This is a comment I've seen, and it's ridiculous that
Nate, no, we're not getting rid of lifters.
But there's been multiple comments online on the YouTube fights for Whiplash that Whiplash doesn't have a weapon. Well, it does. It's a lifter. It's always been a lifter. They just decided not to put the spinner on. But because it didn't have its spinner on, it's ended up on YouTube.
That's the difficulty. I feel like, in terms of having more judges as well, like, in an ideal world, yeah, great. Have more consistent results. You know, you get 5 judges. That's the other thing. Jevon mentions, you know, money is also a factor in this, where if you're going to be paying another 2 people, another 4 people, that's all well and good, but do you want to do that when the format's been the same for so long and people are used to it? That's the other thing.
It's also interesting. So the judges cannot go back to being Roboteers at the moment, only after 2 years of being away from the thing. And that's apparently a rule in broadcasting or something like that.
Conflict of interest, absolutely. And you don't want to have to, you know, to deal with that.
We spoke we spoke about this with Mike Jeffries, didn't we? Because he was talking, and he was kind of helping design the matrix, the damage matrix for this season, and he was mentioning, okay, well, it's kind of unethical almost for him to then start competing again when he's had such an influence, I suppose, in the rules.
Yeah. I will also say this year's rule set has been the tightest yet. It's the one I've liked the most yet. There have been some questionable things in there, but on the whole, it's worked out pretty well looking back on the season. I think that the biggest issue we had going into the season was just ignored in that Utas were made illegal, but
we'll get to that.
I think this year's rule set has been really quite rugged. All of the judges have been using them well. It's just that people don't understand them quite as well as they need to.
And I
To
think,
put
like,
through an idea. Oh no, Lindsay and I again. You go first this time. I cut you off last time.
Sorry. Just real quick, like, and that's why I think you don't want to have rotating judges, why you don't want to have fresh faces. You want someone who is, like, entrenched in the rules and know them in and out, so that they're not using their gut or, like, what they think happened. They know the rules inside and out, and, like, you only get that by doing it for a long time and, like, dedicating yourself to understanding the rules. And I think, like, that above all else should be protected.
Yeah. I also like the idea it's given by Alexander Archer, who says they need to show the judging cards after every fight. It could be put up where it says who won the fight. Put up the judges' results.
Just in the corner of the screen. That kind of thing. Kind of like how they have the pre-fight interview in the corner of the screen.
Yeah. It would be a simple fix to more clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like how Havoc does it. Every time there's a judge's decision, you know, whether or not it worked.
We can see Jack Reed on the screen. that's
but
that's
at
the main
least you
thing.
saw the numbers.
Yeah.
Anything more, Tweedy?
I don't understand. I mean, I don't get what the criticism is, because right now we have Greg Munson's iPhone photo that sometimes goes up onto the broadcast. I don't even know where these cards go at the end of, like, the show. Do they just chuck them in the trash? I mean, like,
at some
it's
point there's going to be
they don't put them up.
It's going to be at some point they'll have collected enough of them and they're just going to sell them on eBay. Here are all the judges' results. Enjoy.
Turn them into a sculpture.
Yes.
So you use them as napkins.
Yeah, absolutely.
One idea I'd like to post is something similar that the International Olympic Committee do, is that they throw out the highest and lowest judging scores. So say if you had more judges and you want to eliminate any bias or anything like that, or any strange scores, you can do that. But you'd of course have to add a certain, if you want to throw out highs and lows, you'd have to have an odd number of judges. Otherwise, you'd have ties.
We have 3 at the moment, but it's not really kind of ideal to just do it with 3 judges, is it really? That would kind of lean more into the 5 or 7
But that
judges.
idea is interesting, and that may satiate people in a way where, like, if you have a card that is just like a judge's card that just seems like the judge didn't see the same fight as the other ones in the line, you can adjust for that. So that's something.
I would say, like, the golden rule of judging in combat robotics is that the fans who, that think that they saw a fight in a particular way, that the judging decision goes that way, and that, like, the criteria needs to fit that. Yeah. So like, when we see controversial decisions, it's because the judging criteria was just a bit too obtuse, or a little too specific, and the bot that was clearly dominating the entire fight ends up losing, and that's why people are upset.
It's like with Beta and Rotator in 2020, right?
Yeah.
I'm watching that fight and I'm thinking, okay, I've watched Beta dominate, but the rules that I've been kind of conditioned to follow says to me that Rotator wins that fight because they did the damage, and that's how BattleBots has been forever. And when Beta's announced as the winner, I'm like, oh my god, like, how? But also, that's right. But what? Like, it was so confusing. It was. I think, Jevon, you described it at the time as, like, I've never been so offended by something I believe is right.
Yep.
And that was basically the only way to describe it, really. It's tough. It is tough. No, there's no right or wrong answer, but, like, it's interesting to kind of see, like, actually so many people have kind of come up with suggesting these changes because, clearly something's not quite right. Should we talk about refs as well, then?
Yeah, briefly.
I think the only thing for me with refs, I think there's not really a major issue, but just make sure they can hear each other and talk to each other.
It's all communication, and I said it when we were talking to the Tantrum group. Mm-hmm. That wall in the middle between the teams, yes, I know it's a COVID thing, but it
give them a headset.
Really, honestly.
So, I had a conversation. I've spent the last few days with Craig Danby, mm-hmm. And Craig had a brilliant suggestion. Have a third ref, and that third ref stands in between the 2 refs, and he's head ref, and he tells the 2 refs when they need to start counting things,
like a sky judge, someone who can see from the outside.
He's the one communicating between the both of them. He's saying, yep, they are counting them out. Hold on, they've stopped the count, continue to engage, etc., etc., etc. And he's calling the shots. That ref, nobody else speaks to. Nobody can go over his head. That ref is the law.
I like that idea. Good idea, Danby.
We love Craig. That was very nice and simple, wasn't it? That was good.
Yeah.
There you go. BattleBots is fixed, everyone. Yes. Oh, there's so much more to get through.
Check the check in the mail.
There's a comment here that says, bring back Jenny Taft as a pit reporter.
It'd be nice.
Yeah.
I believe she's having or had a baby.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is
so
why
this would count as paternity leave?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of difficult to bring her back. As I think she was brilliant in the 2 seasons. 2 seasons? 3 seasons?
Yeah.
2 seasons.
2 seasons.
That she was there. I thought she was really, really good, and she offered a lot to the show. It's just depending on schedule, really. Like, it'd be nice to kind of see.
She also works for a whole other sports network too. Then again, so does Chris. But still, it's a lot.
Yeah,
and I know Kenny does stuff with UFC. It's like these people, they have other lives outside of BattleBots. They do a lot. So
I think like this has been a topic that we've talked a lot about, where it just feels like there's a lot of fluff this season, particularly like a lot of slow motion shots, a lot of laser eyes, a lot of people crossing their arms,
Reese Stewart flicking money out, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dead time, and a lot of the same interviews. I think the interviews were cool, I'm going to kind of jump in on what you're saying here, Luke, where
Yeah.
it's like I feel like the lead up interviews for the fights were cool when they first started showing up in season 3, back when Discovery first got it, but they become kind of rote, where it's like, oh, we're going to go in and use our weapon and dominate the round. It's like, all right, cool. If you don't do that, then I think there's something wrong with you.
I've also noticed they're getting longer and longer,
Yes.
and it's taking time out of the fights we could be seeing, honestly.
Yeah. And they're not very specific. It's not like you're going in and you're saying, hey, I've got a huge wedge and they've got a horizontal spinner. I really should be the one to come out on top of this just physically, and like watch for the rock, paper, scissors, like I'm feeling really confident about this. It's all this like kind of self-deprecating, like, I don't know, they're pretty great. I wonder what's going to happen. And it's like, okay, great. Like how many of those can I really hear without like substance, And I think when people say like, bring back Jenny Taft, what they really mean is like, bring back the view of the pits. Like we saw very few like pit segments at all. And like the really interesting stuff is happening in the pits, and like bring back better questions, bring back more insights from the builders, bring back more builder faces and voices, versus just kind of the long shots of the robots and, with the lasers coming out,
There was a wonderful segment that got cut of Pete Abramson talking to Aaron Hill regarding Blip and how it works. That's the sort of stuff we want to see.
Yeah, right.
I imagine COVID plays like some factor in it, because I know that Pete could only go into the pits for like a half hour a day and could only spend 10 minutes with any one person. So I imagine that like limited what they could do. But again, like I'm sure there's a creative workaround. It's just like a matter of having a person there dedicated to figuring out that workaround.
Yeah, you could have Pete in a box in the lower right hand corner, and he's asking like through the PA questions, and you have your pit cam crew that are there and getting the close-ups of the shots of the bot and everything, and
have like a drone camera. Those are like so can be driven so specifically. I don't know, something.
You could even, because they've got the building, they could just wire up some cameras to do a flyover shot over the building, and it would work. They've got the space.
Yeah.
They've got.
Yeah.
I had proposed to Norwalk Havoc. A really great idea would be to have like a repetitive GoPro shot over every team's table, so like you can like see what that feed is like and like what's happening as like the war of attrition kind of parses down the teams. There's always that one consistent overhead shot of a table. I think that'd be pretty cool.
I also like the idea that we would get some of the funny antics of, like, we saw a little bit of it of the Copperhead team using their tools to do nothing because they'd finished working on the bot and just starting, I can't remember what exactly they were doing, like hoovering the top of the robot or something like that. But I like the idea we would get to see some of those antics as well, because there's a lot that goes on we don't see. People like having fun.
Like a couple years ago, there was Will Bales having like the go-kart. I forget what exactly happened. We had like a go-kart ride with Hypershock, like in the back, and like that was fun. And he kind of
he had Jenny take it around. That was that was that segment. She had her drive to see if she could do as well as he did around that track.
That was cool.
And Jenny got into big trouble for that, actually. She apparently production was not happy that they like took all this time and took all this space in the back to make that happen. But that was a great segment. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah. I think the safety crew came and shut them down. Is what I've been told.
Yeah.
But
it was still fun.
Yes, and that's the thing where like there's this concept in Lean Six Sigma where you have something that's value added. You're actually adding worth to the show. Where instead of you're just killing time and filling time just to meet your runtime, where in this case we're talking about a TV show, not like a business run, you know what I mean? But it still relates. Where if you're not doing something that's adding value to your product, why are you doing it?
I don't think we want the show to be all killer no filler, but we do want it to be decent filler.
Yeah, if you're gonna do filler, just make it good.
Yeah.
Should we just move on to like other like smaller rules, like a maximum fork length, with the kind of trend going the way things are at the moment? We've seen Endgame come out with ridiculously long fork, longer than the entire chassis of the robot.
I want 40-foot forks. I want to see
Yeah.
8 foot
The
of
whole-
box. Yeah.
The
They
thing-
should just have a formula for, you take the maximum fork length and that, exponentially grows the size of the kill slots.
Yeah.
Right. Until everyone's just driving over.
Driving around a
sewer
massive
grate.
kills. Yeah.
You're just riding on grill slots, basically.
I think. See, the thing is with that though, like,
I think.
go on, Carl.
Oh, I think they already have a limit on forks, and it's called Minotaur and Daniel Freitas. Like, just drive your forks in against him, and he'll limit your forks real quick and easy. It's not hard,
He
Your
will.
fork's too long. Daniel Freitas will solve it.
But even then, like, there is also just the limitation of maneuverability, and like there will come a point when you have forks that are so long. We almost saw it with Hydra and Endgame, where Jake was able to maneuver in such a way where Endgame was struggling to kind of turn the way that he wanted to, and
There will come a day where the builders will realise that long forks are not the answer, and I think we're getting close to it.
there is a
Honestly, I think
perfect
this is
point,
one of
isn't
the
there?
things. Yeah, I think this is one of the things where people are going to go, okay, that was dumb. We're not going to do that again, and we're seeing that now. The long forks they don't win fights. They don't make fights interesting.
They do. They definitely win fights. It's just that they might not win every
Not
fight.
always.
There's
Scorpios
that's the thing.
versus Whiplash. Such a close judge's decision because both of them had long forks and neither of them could get an advantage over each other. Possibly one of the slowest matches of the season, I would say, in the fact that neither robot could really do much to the other because long forks got in the way. Yeah. So an idea I can't remember who had it, but have a rule saying you can only have forks if they're powered.
That was Jake. Yeah.
No, that was was it? Yeah,
it was Jake.
It was Jake. It was Jake here, yes.
Powered forks and say either it's a part of a lifting setup or you've got like motors or something, I don't know, keeping them down, but have them as powered. And BattleBots has the power to say they could do that or not.
Yeah.
But
or they could keep changing the arena profile and just make it even harder for them to use forks.
We'll get to that, I think, in a second. I think the other thing, big kind of rule issue, translational movement. Now, there is a post due apparently from BattleBots.
Well, there's a post regarding unsticks to BattleBot supporters, which I thought was brilliant at the time, and then went, well, hang on a minute, they've only introduced this to supporters.
Yeah, it should have been to everybody.
Why is this not global?
Because they're scared about the outrage. They're scared.
I think it's because also they're trying to finalise some of the details and
we're guinea pigs.
Cross the T's
we're
and dot the I's.
Yeah.
The general consensus
I don't
so
mean
far.
to be so mean, just true.
The general consensus of the guinea pigs so far has been positive, though. I think a lot of people are fine with it. But
until the Cobalt Duck happens again. That's when it all starts going the way.
As the biggest hater of that outcome, I'm perfectly happy with that if it means we don't get.
The alternative is worse, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like ultimately, both sides are a compromise. Everyone wants to see a full fight, go the distance, and both robots work how they're meant to for the duration. The issue is, if they get stuck, then they get stuck. It's like sometimes sometimes it do be like that.
Yeah, it's the same with translational movement, though. I feel, and you did mention it, and then we went off topic. I think if a robot's still moving, they're moving. It doesn't matter about the outcome of the fight at that point. They're going to be losing points if it does get to a judge's decision, or they're going to get absolutely bodied by the working robot.
So I actually had a theory about this one, and this could kind of tie in with the head ref thing. So what you could do is, if one ref is starting to think, okay, you're not moving freely, the ref will then say to the head ref, okay, I'm going to start counting them out. Then the head ref says to the ref, okay, go back to your corner. You wait there, go back to your starting square. If they can get back to their starting square within a set time limit, let's say 10 seconds, then, okay, fight can resume. Kind of like a pause in boxing, like, when they get kind of clutched in together, the ref pulls them apart, and then off you go again.
Right, you got 10 seconds to get back up on your feet, essentially.
Yeah,
boxing,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Similar kind of concept. You get 10 seconds to kind of.
And that's where because the count out is actually 20 seconds. It's 10 seconds to check, 10 seconds to count.
Yeah.
Yes.
That 10 seconds to check could be that. Get back to that square over there, or go to a certain spot, or even somebody has suggested have a spotlight come down over the robot, and if you can get out of that spotlight fully, the fight continues.
Yeah, I think Sorry, go for it.
No, yeah, this is just going to be a thing.
Stephen is the ultimate, you know.
I am the ultimate blocker of words. Let's see. Just one quick thing, and then I'll let you go. Yeah. So the fact of having a spotlight would be nice. Not only just that, but also a more clear understanding of what constitutes avoidance in a fight, where you're basically trying to
Run
end
down
the
the
fight
clock.
early. Yeah, in a way, you know, and it's one, it's not good TV, and two, it's just not right. Because the fight is still going on. You've been to enough live events, I think all of us have, where a fight, like a robot is just limping along, but you're still like they're still trying to take it to the opponent, but the opponent, you can't be penalized for the other opponent being faster than you just because you got banged up,
And I
you're
think
still somewhat functional.
if the count out is happening and you get engaged with, from the moment they stop engaging again, continue the count. Don't restart the count.
Yeah, I think like what it comes down to, and there need to be more definition around what this means, but if you can pursue your opponent in a way, like, then I think the match should continue on. Like, I don't think in any world Ribot should have been counted out because Ribot was still actively pursuing their opponent. Same with Minotaur.
Yeah.
You know, and who knows what can happen, like if their opponent goes in for an attack, like then they have an opportunity to also like counterattack, and that can change the course of the fight. So I think it has to be if you can pursue your opponent, they should still be pursuing you, right? I don't know. It just seems like we want to avoid situations in the future where one bot can pursue their opponent, but the other bot is not.
Yeah.
And I know that there is like a number of reasons why that happened in the Minotaur and Witch Doctor fight. I'm not putting blame on Witch Doctor at all, but like just in the future, that is something that could have been avoided with like proper guidance, proper communication, proper rules.
I was going to say that whole situation was caused by poor communication between the refs.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yep. I think the other really like minor thing with regard to this is a smaller field idea. I get where the commenter, I think the guy was Josh on our YouTube community post, Josh Neal. I get it. Everyone should have the same amount of fights, which, you know, we've kind of alluded to already. You know, we've been in our own separate podcast. We kind of said, you know, we were kind of disappointed that some teams only got 2, some teams got 3. Having a smaller field does limit a bit of variation just by definition. The fact there's a smaller field, you know, I don't want to think of a world where, you know, you're not going to see some of our favourites come back. You know, it's kind of, I don't know. What do you think?
It's an interesting one because if we have a smaller field, I think it reduces then the number of new bots we get, because BattleBots has basically brand ownership of a lot of the bots we see on TV, like your Hypershocks, your Witch Doctors, your Tombstones. They're all big names and they're all marketable and they've all got toys. Hypershock soon, thank God. And the issue with reducing the field is that we get to see less and less new bots. There was already a lack of new bots this season, I feel. There weren't many of them. There were good ones, and, you know, we didn't get to see the likes of a two-headed Death Flamingo or, you know, other new bots. I'm using two-headed Death Flamingo because you're here, Sam. But yeah, we need more bots, I think. And with the field reducing, I don't think that's the way to go about it.
I have an idea about how to mitigate this later on, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
Yeah, I was going to say a bigger field would need a slight shake-up in the tournament format, I feel.
Mm-hmm. We'll get to that a bit later on.
I think one of the big things is we used to have more room for more robots because during the 2-week filming, it was just the BattleBots competition. Now, in the same amount of time, it's both BattleBots and bounty hunters.
Yeah.
And so now they're trying to squeeze in 2 separate shows into the same amount of filming. And I feel like while it's cool to be able to have bounty hunters, we are, you know, facing the consequences of that in having fewer bots and having fewer interesting bots, new bots, which I think like add in that like lifeblood to the show.
Yeah.
Because you don't want it to just be the same 30 bots year after year after year. That's going to be one of the quickest ways to having the show get canceled, in my opinion, because gets stale.
It's interesting you say that. Looking at the filming schedule for this season, because they release it to the audience when you go to buy tickets, or you get to see what you're going to see. And the first week was the opening rounds. It's not enough time, and some of those were dark days where they are just building. It's like there's not enough time to get the full field. Their 3 fights recorded. Just needs to be longer, or you need to look at what you're recording and how you're producing it. I love bounty hunters, but if it was a toss-up between having bounty hunters and having a full competition, I'd choose a full competition.
A builder that we spoke to this season, I won't mention who because it could get him into trouble, but basically, like, they likened it to a restaurant. And if you go into a restaurant, you know, and they have an amazing pudding or dessert or whatever, you have an amazing dessert, that's great, but you also want your starter and your main to be good as well. Otherwise, what's the point? You know, and having, you know, bounty hunters is a great dessert. It's wonderful, but make sure that your house is in order first before you kind of get to that point.
Especially
to that point, though. Oh, sorry, Lindsay. Go ahead.
No, just one real quick, like, especially because bots, the teams will suffer because their sponsors now get less airtime. They might reconsider wanting to sponsor again. And so you're making it even more unsustainable. Go for it, Kyle.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just based on our now literal years of experience at Norwalk Havoc, even though we've only been doing it for a little over a year, there is a period of time at the end of the tournament where, you know, you're down to your last few bots. You're down to just the time limits between things where bots have to be fixed and repaired and prepped and whatnot, and the arena needs to be reset, where you do have time for grudge matches, for rumbles, for all of those things. They used to fill that time with other stuff. You know what I mean? Like now, that time is just filled with bounty hunters, which I think is technically a good use of the production time, production schedule. And, you know, it does get more airtime, not as prominent of airtime, but more airtime for the bots to be on air for their sponsors and to show what they can do and try out new things. So I'm not necessarily opposed to bounty hunters. I do think that in this situation, you're talking about field reduction is like the only thing that makes any sense, or you do make it 3 weeks of filming, but you only, as a team, you only have to be there for 2, right? Like there should be no requirement for anybody to be there that first week, but if you want to get in and get your fights, especially if you're a new team, that's the time to do it. That would make the most sense to me to fix this problem, but man, it's a complicated problem. They've got a lot to jam into those 2 weeks, and you really can't ask these people to be there longer than 2 weeks when you're not paying them.
Yeah, I think it's also an issue that they had a whole day taken out by power cut this year, which is obviously not ordinary operational process, but you know, it didn't help matters this year. I'm hoping that improves for the next season, and you know, hope they get more time. But you're absolutely right, Kyle. If they're getting paid for those 3 weeks, they're more likely to want to go for those 3 weeks, right?
That easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, from what I understand, the power cut did not limit them too terribly much. Like, they got through everything they were planning on filming that day, but I think it did add to this air of, oh crap, right, for the whole season. Like, oh no, we're behind. And that's never a good situation to be in when you're trying to be creative, when you're trying to, you know, figure out the best storylines, figure out the best content. You never want to be in a place with, oh, I'm behind, this is terrible. You want to be in a place where you're on schedule, you're comfortable, you've got some room, you got some things you can do. And, you know, that's not what they had this year at all.
Nope. Let's talk arena changes. Do you guys want to start with this one?
Yeah, I mean, Upper Deck, it was highly contentious. We've heard, you know, behind the scenes that it was a surprise. So Trey Roski, one of the co-founders of BattleBots, one of the co-owners of BattleBots. He is obsessed with the arena. It's kind of like his arena, and he cooked up this idea for the upper deck in the off season, built it, and then told everyone just several weeks before filming. And it was very rushed to get details about the upper deck out to the builders. So the builders weren't, they didn't know like how large the gap was, say, along the rails of the upper deck. And there were some like initial ideas that the only way you're going to get off the upper deck is over those rotating screws, and that it was going to be closer to a true proper ball pit or whatever. And a lot of those got scrapped. 10-second count out, that is gone. So in the end, it was just this kind of neutered thing that sat in the arena, and I would argue no one really used it super effectively.
Yeah, it was benign.
Benign, yes.
It didn't really offer anything, did it, really? Like, for me, I mean, I've seen so many comments on both of our posts saying, oh, they should get rid of it because it didn't really offer anything, which is just true. But the thing is, my dog's just shaking herself. The issue is, I feel, is that it just wasn't utilised well enough. Like, if they'd have gone with the original... Oh, she's got her toy. Oh, that's really cute. Remember to cut this bit. Oh, no, keep it in. Keep it in, even better. Oh, there we go. So basically, what my thing is, if they'd have gone with the original idea of have the upper deck be fully enclosed, the only way off is over the screws, and as soon as you go on there...
jeopardy, doesn't it?
That's what I mean. Just add a little bit of jeopardy to it. Like, you have 10 seconds, you've got to get off within 10 seconds, or else you are out. Like, I know it's not a pit, but it is still like...
Pit. It's a pit that's a little higher than the floor.
It's the anti-pit.
Yeah, it's the anti-pit. But like that's the thing. I feel like if they'd have done that instead and said, okay, it is then a legitimate threat. If you're a flipper, you want to put someone up there because, hey, if they're up there for 10 seconds and they've got to self-right and they've got to get off the screws if they're not spinning the right way, then you're in trouble. Like
I did like the clarity of the count out and everything. The light tree flashing red when they were up there to say, uh-oh.
That wasn't translated on... I don't think they ever talked about that once on broadcast.
No.
So it's assumed.
Yeah.
Another thing.
Yeah.
But I think the original idea was if they just still up, like stay up there for too long, they just get counted out, right? That was the initial...
If they're up there
offer.
for 10 seconds, they're counted out.
Yeah,
that's
that...
the same as the rest of the arena.
Make it an official rule. Like, if as soon as you go up there, count starts. You've got 10 seconds to get off. If you don't get off, sorry, you lose.
The floor is lava.
Literally.
Yeah. The shelf is lava.
I think what would make the shelf a bigger threat is have two of them, but in the corners. So the only way up and the only way down is then the screws that are there, and there is no other way off because you're stuck in a corner otherwise. I don't know how big you'd make them, but it would also open up the arena a little bit more. It would get rid of these stupid side kill zones in which the vertical spinners can just corral you and keep you, and that's apparently not corralling, and unless it is corralling, in which case it's corralling. It's the biggest issue with the arena at the minute, I think, is not the deck itself, it's the areas beside it has caused. And if you put the upper deck in those corners, it then opens up the arena, and it gives you everything you wanted and more. I'm selling
little raised areas. How about little raised areas where the pulverizers are, where you get them up on top of them, and then if they have a hard time getting down, you're really going to get hammered on. Or there was another comment that was posted. I think it was in our final episode review with the Tantrum team, where somebody talked about putting in something similar to a pyramid ramp in a skate park, where at least it gives some 3D definition to the arena, but it doesn't cause this huge wart. I like the way that I described it in the preview, Sam, where it's like you pulled a drawer out from the side of the arena, and then there's just the shelf here. So I mean, there's ideas.
I still like
around.
the upper deck as a slot machine, and it's going in and out. Not slot machine, but
like one of those pusher. Yeah.
And it's gonna push you out, or it's gonna get you stuck.
So
really leaning to Vegas. I think if you were to go for the two corner sections, if they really don't like the idea of ooters, it gives robots more of an opportunity to get back into the arena than the ooter zones do, because the ooter zones, when you're out, good luck getting back in. It's incredibly difficult. It's too tight for starters, but also it adds the level of jeopardy we've talked about before in the doors are there and they want to be safe around the doors. Why they don't just use the other door, I don't know.
That was actually brought up. Let's have a look. Alexander Archer again kind of said add 2 dedicated Uta zones, which why not put them the other side of the arena, out of the way of the doors. Doors can open freely. If you Uta this side... Oh, my dog's barking. Bear with me, carry on.
Yeah, so if you Uta on that side, just don't use that door to access. Use the other door. You've got 2. You made that for COVID. It's a simple fix. Sliding doors would also work in that it's safer than having 2 sections you need to open, or even have a top section you can open to lean over and deactivate the robot, make it safe, and then you can open the second door.
There was an interesting idea from Chris Horry to add death zones where you could demonstrate to the judges control. If you can kill your opponent and corral them into a specific, say, circle in the corner of the box, you have shown total control, total domination, total destruction, and I can win more control points that way. If I can keep my opponent in a death zone like the shelf, or even just a drawing on the floor, without them escaping, I can win more control points there, more aggression points perhaps. I thought that was a really interesting idea from Chris. We just had a lot of questions about Uta, including just selective use of Uta rules, where it's hey, I out of the arena somebody, but I had a big enough oopsie face, so the refs believed that I didn't do it on purpose.
I think there was a discussion had before the season on what constitutes an Uta.
The drivers' meeting, definitely, because the end game teams. I remember that being brought up, that the end game team was you can't. Well, not just them, but I remember them being a vocal majority of that being talked about and saying, hey, you can't get rid of the one way that we won the season last year, and also you can't cut out a way for a match to end that people have designed for. Right before an
flippers,
event.
I think how do flippers KO an opponent now?
Yeah, it was discussed at this builder meeting, I believe, that you had to drive your opponent across the arena a certain distance and then get them out for that to be the thing. Sort of how Tantrum did to Rotate.
And Hydra did to Graph. I know Endgame didn't mean to with saw plays, but they still did.
Yeah, it's one that's very blasé, and they just went, sod it, and full sent it.
If they're gonna introduce a rule like that, they kind of need to either enforce it or
just not introduce it in the first place.
There's it's an Uta is very black or white. They're either in the arena or they're out of it.
And I think Utas have been a staple of the sport for a good many years. To rid of them at this point is
thanks, George. That was really good of you.
George Francis,
back in the years.
The ultimate oopsie face.
Yep, that was the ultimate oopsie face, because it's oh man, this has never been done before. Am I supposed to do this? Am I DQ'd? Did they break something?
Probably.
Yeah. I have 2 thoughts about this. One, I was given a pit pass this past season, and there were probably 3 gripes that I heard from a lot of builders, and one of them was Utas. They were saying, we got guidance that if a vertical spinner Uta somebody, then that's fine. But if a flipper does it, then that shows intent. And if there's intent, then they're going to get disqualified. And every single flipper bot was you're just making this more difficult for me. Do you just not want flippers to win ever, And that was a huge kind of complaint that I heard in the pits. The other is kind of coming back to this idea of we should create higher stakes inside of the box. If I Uta somebody, maybe that is an automatic disqualification, and I have to make sure that I don't do that, just because I can, right? Or if I put somebody up on the upper deck, then that triggers automatic contact. There can be more interesting ways to inject stakes into the arena, where it's I don't want to go over there. That's the corner of the box that I don't want to be in, right? Maybe you split the arena down the middle and you say, hey, this is the blue side and this is the red side. For every single second that I'm on my side, I'm clearly showing a lack of control. Like I have to push my opponent back into their side of the arena, and like I just think there's like more interesting things we can do, floor is lava kind of ideas, versus what we do now, which is just like, hey, we've got a bunch of hazards that don't really do a lot. We've got some arena stuff that doesn't really do a lot. We've got UDAs that aren't supposed to be there, but I guess they are because we didn't design anything around it. We didn't even protect our doors. Like it's just kind of, I think the arena can have a little bit of a rethink.
I think the one of the main reasons they didn't do anything with UDAs this season, because the upper deck was meant to be the replacement, but because things can just drive off of the upper deck, they couldn't really then say, well, it's tough to be a flipper, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is this where we discover that Nate Franklin is actually part of production, and that his band lifters is actual real sentiment, and that he invented the upper deck?
Oh man,
how could he?
No one got into Trey's head and inserted the idea to put this wart in the arena. So.
Oh dearie me. Is there really much else to add for arena changes? I mean, we kind of mentioned that, there's lots of hazards that people do. People have said like remove all hazards, which I feel like would make it quite boring for a
Robo
TV
game.
show.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
you've created
Normal
Robo
Havoc.
Yeah.
Let's throw it over to you guys, because you operate with a box that has the house robots in, which is somewhat of a help or a hindrance, I suppose. But I wouldn't call it so much as a hazard. How do you feel regarding hazards in your boxes?
I mean, like, I don't think we've seen a modern BattleBots match that has been determined by the hazards. I mean, unless you get stuck under, the arena, which is just the least satisfying way to lose a match.
Yeah.
Like the kill saws don't really do much. The Hellraisers don't really come up anymore. The hammers can sometimes do some fun looking damage, but it's never functional. I like the idea of being able to trigger a pit, that pops up on the other side of the arena, and I can show control by pushing you into it. But they're just there for TV. They're not functional at all. So it just creates more like a less pure fighting experience, because oh wow, I just backed into a kill saw, didn't mean to do that, I didn't know it was going to come up, and I don't lose any control points for that. So I don't know, it's a throwback. So many things in BattleBots are not because it's the smartest thing to do, it's because we've always done it, and it's a
harkens
throwback.
back to Comedy Central.
Yeah.
What you said about hitting a button is interesting. I wonder if they had a button activated upper deck, instead of dropping it like a pit, lifting it out of the ground to then be a proper hazard, because then it makes those short corners make sense, it makes the deck make sense, makes the screws there make sense. Trigger the upper deck, not just have it.
That sounds like money.
That sounds like money, and if that from an automation standpoint, if that breaks down in the middle of filming, that's super expensive to you have to get in there and tear everything apart to fix it. Yeah, from a guy who's done theatrical automation before, let's avoid that one.
It's just Trey under there doing a deadlift.
No, he's just got a bike and he's lifting it up.
That I buy.
So, the first days, when we first started doing Wheel of Fortune over here, you had somebody with their feet underneath it trying to break the wheel so it didn't keep spinning.
Oh dear.
I will say this: the one time that we have seen the times that we do see the hazards have an effect on the match, it always makes people mad. I think back to Blacksmith getting caught up on the screws and them not reversing when they did reverse for Witch Doctor. That was the first conspiracy theory, the show is rigged for Witch Doctor moment, I guess, in the show. And then I also think back to Jameson, Go, and Sawblaze losing their fight to Uppercut, partially because the pulverizer came down on them while they were driving towards Uppercut and getting them, they were about to pin them up against the wall, but then their progression was kind of stopped
and Tombstone
by the pulverizer.
With them as well.
Yeah, that's right. It did happen with them.
I totally agree that the The reason why we still have hazards is because it is that, I'll call it technical debt. It's that historic legacy as part of the sport. One of the things that I really like about Norwalk is that there's less emphasis on that to make it exciting. And what they do to make it more exciting is have less rules and regulations about what you can do with your bots. And so you have people really putting some scary crap together, and that
we saw what happened with depth charge, let's say that much.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's what's exciting about Norwalk is that you never know what's going to be in the box next, right? And the hazards were a way to kind of zhuzh up a landscape that was getting less and less exciting to watch back in the day. And you know, I really want to see people, you know, leverage more creative thinking in what they're bringing to the competition, and that is the excitement factor that I'm looking for, and I hope that a lot of other people look at it the same way.
I think we are in somewhat of a golden age of thinking outside the box. You know, we've had the age of everyone's got a 4- or 2-wheel drive vertical spinner, and now people are starting to think, okay, what can I do with this sport? What can I build? How far can we push it? Can I make a robot out of lightsabers? Hell yes, I can. You know, there's plenty going on.
Whoever that person is, let's make sure that we devote an entire episode to them, Luke. Write that down.
Yes, please.
That's good. You know, even the insistence on us running 250-pound robots is a throwback to the 90s. You know, because why were they so large? Because we had to put car batteries inside of them, right? Yeah. Why were they so large? Because there was no television audience. You had to sit in the stands and watch robots, and you couldn't watch a 30-pound robot from, you know, the top of the bleachers. It'd be super boring. And you have to ask yourself, why are we continuing to run 250-pound robots at BattleBots? You know, if you could solve the cost question by lowering the cost of the robots, you could solve the arena question by making the arena smaller. You could bring in all sorts of super competitive designs. You can run 2 or 3 fights for the same robot in the same day. We could just cram a ton more fights in, right? We are wedded to this idea that BattleBots means large robots, right? And we just can't let go of that. We can't let go of the kill saws. We can't let go of the spikes. We can't get rid of the size of the arena. We can't get rid of like this idea that BattleBots can never be a live show. You know, like there's all of these things that we tell ourselves. These can never be, right? Like we can't change that. Like BattleBots is X, Y, Z, right? And like that rigidness of thinking, I think is a problem. You know, when you talk about sustainability in the sport, when you talk about cost, I mean, you could fix so many problems if we weren't so obsessed with it has to be just like the show was in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Myself and Jevon have both like dealt with heavyweights ourselves, you know, and I don't know about you, Jevon, but after every weekend, you know, I do a live event, my back is in absolute
Heavyweights
pieces.
are heavy.
They really are.
Like,
they're so big.
Jeez.
And you can't store them anywhere. So that you know, my heavyweight, Two-Headed Death Flamingo, or my team's heavyweight, I should say, not mine specifically, lives in one of my team's garages, and it takes up half his garage. Yeah. And it's just like,
mine is propped up at the front of our garage and is in the way of everything.
Yeah, like whereas a featherweight,
up here.
Taking up so much room, you know, just
no thoughts, head empty. No, like even just featherweights, like featherweights, you get the same level of smashy, but like for a fraction of the cost.
I'll be honest, my featherweight is one of the most fun robots I run.
You get the idea. Like it's at the same time, I get why it's heavyweights because you know heavyweights are the biggest and the most spectacular. You usually see these amazing amounts of energy get flung around the arena, but like
you get the same. You get the same with that in 30-pounders these days. And, you know, I've said it a few times. I actually, when I was on Behind the Bots, I was optimistic about the heavyweight scene. My whole thought process has changed around it since. Because I've actually been questioning that thought and going, well, is this the future? We've kind of brought this up as well, like before. Like, if BattleBots didn't exist, there would be no US heavyweight scene, in my opinion. Nope. Or it would be going very, very quickly. You know, there's no more robo games. You know, I know Robotica is a thing in Texas. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of the right place, but it's kind of limited in like its appeal to people because one, it's so expensive to do, and two, they are bloody big. Yeah. You know, there's no.
it's not really practical to stick a heavyweight in the boot of your car or in the trunk of your car and kind of take it to an event, because you need 3 people to lift it, and then you need 3 people to take it out, and then you need 3 people to maintain it over the weekend. A featherweight or a beetleweight you could probably do by yourself.
Yeah. What do we got? We got Ruckus here. There's Kilobots up in Saskatoon. Do they do heavies, or are they just all low weight classes? That's what I mean. Like, there's nothing domestic that really has that pull.
The UK has it, but I mean, in lieu of a TV show, that is it. You know, and that scene is, I don't know. I'll be interested to see what Extreme Robots comes back with. They're coming back to Portsmouth in a few weeks' time, and it'll be interesting to see what that field looks like now. Whether it'll be the same bots we've seen previously, whether it be some new things, whether it be some less than we've seen. I don't know.
One more comment on hazards, and I know we kind of derailed.
Oh yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, but in any case, I'd like to point out that one of the most effective hazards that have been in the box recently are those whack-a-moles, or whatever they're called.
Yeah,
and they're not talked about much.
Well, they don't get used, do they? Really? Like, they're only used for full starts.
You'd be surprised how honestly how often those things come up and out of the ground in a fight to break the ground game up. To be honest, you'll see them more often than any other hazard being used in the arena.
Just
and those sensors that they go over, it's supposed to break the ground game up. It's supposed to stop box rushes.
As we heard from the Tantrum team, they drove straight into and trying to fight Gigabyte and bent their wedge.
Yeah.
And yeah, that went well for them.
All right. Well,
I
know what the next thing is, and I'm not ready.
What is this? The show itself?
No, it's the. No, it goes back to. I just read the first part of it. It's the following the Rich Watch Doctor.
Oh yeah, no, this is just a small thing, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, the count out screen. Yeah, I'd be okay with the count out screen.
Robot Wars had something similar. Like
more transparency.
Robot Wars, when that was on the air, when that came back, like, you had a little screen in front of you and you had a little timer. If you were being counted out by the judges at the time, like, you would see, okay, I'm being counted out here, I need to get a shift on. And
Noel Sharkey had a button he pressed.
The Doom button.
And all 3 judges had to agree that robot was immobile. It wasn't a 10 seconds to check, it was I think it's a mobile.
Okay.
Yes, it's a mobile. Click.
Yeah, and if the ref could do the same thing, they can have a little button, and they could still do the big theatrical 10, 9, 8. John Raymar could still do his thing.
It would actually make that count more consistent as well, because I swear that it's faster or slower at times. But yeah, if you've got it up in front of you, you can do it to the timer and just really pound them out.
That's getting cut. Maybe not from our one, but it's getting cut from behind the bot, isn't it? Oh dearie me. Okay. Tournament and show format. This is kind of a loaded topic, because we kind of mentioned about the 2 fights, 3 fights thing that was happening this season. My one change that I would make, I like the pre-season, post-season fight card thing. I think that's a really cool concept. You get a guaranteed set. Well, you should get a guaranteed set number of fights, but like you get more than one. Like look back at 15 and 16. That's been it's on Netflix and wherever else now. I look at that now and I think, imagine turning up to BattleBots, having spent X $1,000 and getting one fight. Rough, right?
That's a thing, Sam. That's how it used to be. This is more going back to this is how the show has always been, and they've grown out of that and said, hey, this doesn't work anymore as a show. If we're gonna have this talent come out and pour all this money and time into something just to show up on a screen for 5 minutes,
it's like, if imagine in 2018, for example, Minotaur's first fight was with Tombstone. Imagine Minotaur being knocked out then and there. I know it was designed to be that fight because that's what everyone wanted to see, but like, the point stands where they potentially lose their first fight. You don't see Minotaur at all in all of 2018. Crazy, right? I think to kind of mitigate these scheduling issues that they were having, and I think, I know COVID's been a thing for a few years and it's been a bit of an issue, bring back Rumbles. You get 1 Rumble and 2 1v1s, something like that, because it will reduce the amount of fights that you need, because instead of having, let's say, 20 or 30, instead of having 30 two-way fights, you get 20 three-way fights. It's 10 fights less. You reduce the amount of turnaround you get. Whether it would work and how you devise that, I don't know. Maybe your first fight's a Rumble and then you get 2 1v1s after that. Like, I know that's very Robot Wars.
And that goes the same for everybody, not just for because it seems like the Rumbles were reserved for bots that hadn't proved their worth yet in a one-on-one,
or to make spaces in the end of season bracket. to work out who.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whereas, if you schedule, okay, everyone gets one rumble, everyone gets 2 1v1s, or something along those lines, you kind of get, okay, I know at some point I'm going to have to fight 2 robots at once. You kind of have that preparation time. And as well as that, you reduce the amount of fights that are actually taking place.
Yeah.
I'd like to know the Americans' thoughts, because that's a very Robot Wars thing, that is, in my mind. It's very, we're used to having melees in the first round and then subsequently go on from there, but I want to know what you guys think of that.
I'm going to stick my neck out here. This is a very unpopular opinion. YouTube, come at me. I hate rumbles. And, every time I see a rumble at Norwalk Havoc, or I see a rumble, from previous seasons or other shows, I was just like, it's just chaos. And it's like the winner
They like the chaos.
No, but you can't even follow it. Like the winner typically just hangs back and then comes around and just hits a bunch of dead robots. And you're like, okay. I mean, I guess this is fine. I mean, we're just destroying our toys, and just all sorts of I don't know, there's no robot that comes out of a rumble that's functional, and you don't really have a strategy for a rumble other than don't engage, and that sucks. And if you're brave and you go in there, you just fight 5 robots at the same time, you're going to die. So it's I don't know. It's just they seem messy and
what about
I don't know.
Should have been in the 42 robot gladiator we had. My God, you couldn't move. It was less hanging back and just more you can't get anywhere. I think I spent most of that match just doing that, trying to get free from certain robots. I get it, I do. Rumbles can be very sort of
messy.
Yeah, well, messy or just boring if one robot decides I'm not going to touch them, or if all 3 decide I'm not going to touch them.
I'm looking at you, Michael Oates.
Yeah.
I've been a passionate defender, and no one else likes this idea, so I'll just throw this out there, of more special mini games, to
trials.
Yeah, to do different things. I'll tell you, I watched 1,000 robot fights last year at Norwalk Havoc. And it's always 3 minutes. It's always 2 robots. They're always going at each other. Mm-hmm. They're always box rushing. They're trying to break one another's wheels. It's exciting. It's great. I love it, obviously. But after 1,000 fights, I'm like, can I see something else? Can I see 2 robots going around with balloons tied to them and the first person to pop the balloons? Can I here, Chris Horry had this really interesting idea, 3-on-3 action, 6 total robots inside of the box. They have a giant nut that sits in the middle, and the first person to push the giant nut into, their opponent's square wins the match. So it's okay, I have a spinner and they're going to attack. I've got, this kind of dustpan design that's going to push the giant nut. I've got a defender, an attacker, and it just creates a different dynamic inside of the box. And I think that's really interesting.
So
probably more interesting and has more strategy than a rumble.
This is the first time I think we're going to actually bring up, in good terms, ClashBots on the RoboCast. One of their side competitions that they did was Capture the Flag, and they had a flag welded to the arena floor. And it was the first team to remove the welded flag from the floor in the fastest time, and it was welded with standoffs and everything. It was really tough, but it made for an interesting time, and it turned out the rammers did best. They just rammed full force into it and managed to free it. It was fantastic. But
I really need to watch the China stuff, don't I?
You do.
Yeah.
ClashBots is weird, man.
I agree that it's a novel idea to introduce esports strategy and gameplay into combat robotics, because honestly, they're kind of on the same wavelength already, and we have a lot of common interests across the fandoms, and I think that it's a natural marriage that would be very entertaining to watch. And there's so many different things that you could do. Of course, you could have a capture the flag. You could you can introduce almost like a tower defense kind of element, or something
King
where you're capturing objectives. But the opportunities there are endless. And
how about a slalom for bots like Claw Viper and Hypershock?
Yeah, and that's what's great about the team dynamic there, is that there's an infinite number of strategies that you can have, because I could have a team that has two horizontals, a flame bot, a control bot, and now I'm building a strategy off of that. It's like the same way in the NBA, how you have teams that like have fast offense, right? And then they have some teams that just have an incredible defensive strategy and are constantly getting rebounds. So it's like, you can play to your driver strengths, you can play to your bot strengths, and there's like we've even talked in one of our episodes about 10 different mini games that could be played, and they could be played right now with 3-pound bots in the 30-pound box at Norwalk. We just need to kind of build out whatever that would be, and that is something I would love to watch as a breakup of like a 10-hour tournament, right? Yeah. Give me 20 minutes of that.
And I can really see that growing the audience too, because there are a lot of people who, like myself, who love like the combat aspect, but are also interested in seeing something that's new and different and unlike what they've seen before. And I think that would actually grab a lot of people who might otherwise be interested in combat robotics, but maybe like just pure destruction gets lost on them. So you kind of like broaden your appeal to more and more people.
And it makes me miss because I've been watching a lot of old Robot Wars on the Mech Plus app. Please go download that if you haven't done that already, because that's just like one of the best things ever to come out of the last
HD
couple
Robot
years.
Wars is crazy,
so good. But I like it's cool to see the pinball and like the soccer tournaments, and like I know there's events around here that like they have robot hockey because why not? I miss that part of it. I miss the gauntlet. I miss stuff like that. I miss things that like made me feel like they were actually I have a background in first, like many of the people in this realm do. But task-oriented robotics competitions are very interesting and could be brought forward a little better. I know ESPN tried to cover it back like in the 90s and they did a terrible job. But in any case, it would be cool to be brought to the forefront. And we just had a documentary come out about FRC, and it's like the interest is there. So I mean, just as just to plant a seed, for the idea of having something like that. It just if it gets me excited, it's got to get other people excited. So.
Thoughts on launching true qualifiers to get into BattleBots, like a regional live show, kind of like American Idol. Bring what you built and try and get in.
Long old conversation with Charlie about this. So I've just spent the week with him, and we've discussed this at great lengths. And it's something that we discussed doing, and BattleBots sort of hinted at doing that they wanted to do, was that they wanted sort of regional things to have ready for the main show. Both he and me are big fans of Monster Jam, as I said already. But they do certain live tours ready for the World Finals. And your World Finals could be the big field selection, but you have the individual areas first. So you could have your California bots, you could have your Miami bots, you could have your...
Could you imagine following that year round? Be like, oh man, there's a shitty bot up in California. I can't wait for them to meet at the World Final.
It's similar in many ways to how Norwalk runs things. Like you have these separate events every month or every other month or whatever it is, and then you have your finals in December, and you have all the top tier teams go back again. It gives everyone a chance to kind of have a run out and get the rust off, and then
that way you could have your smaller field. It's another way of fixing that. If you need to have a smaller field to fit all the robots in, regional ones would work. Again, with as many British bots that applied for, I think it was the 2020 season or 2021, loads of British bots apply every time, and loads of Europeans. You could have a European qualifiers, and that way only the best of the best get shipped across, get to go. I do like the idea of sort of your international teams getting automatic placements, your Australians, your New Zealanders and all that, because there aren't many of them. And if they want it to be a world championships, it's the only way you can do it, is have the world championships where the world comes to fight. But even then, I might be inclined to, sort of get rid of the dead weight or the robots that may not work for the whole competition. It's a big thing of the selection committee that they want robots that will run through a tournament bracket to win, or to be able to do that all the way through to get there.
I pitched this idea before, and I'll just get up on my little soapbox and pitch it one more time. I guess to a different audience. But, like if we broke up the world into 5 or 10 regions and each region had its own qualifier, we could also change the format of the show to say, if you win your qualifier, if you win in your region, you get to select your team. You select 4 other robots to come with you to BattleBots, and now we are the Brazil team. We are now the Europe team. We are the Asian team, right? We're the Australian team, right? And if you lose one of your bots in a match with another team, that bot is out of your deck. And for you to win, you need to survive as a team. You win as a team or you lose as a team, right? And the giant nut comes home, with you to your region.
Yes.
Like kind of getting rid of the selection committee and instead allowing the captains themselves to build their own teams. You could say, hey, look, we're all of the UK bots and we're going to do like a UK qualifiers. And, the captain of Apollo is going to choose, the team that's going to go to BattleBots. I think would be really cool. And just kind of build more like team sport dynamics where you're like, yeah, I want to buy that t-shirt. I want to like really root for my team.
I want the Team UK t-shirt with all of the UK bots. And then we could actually have something akin to what King of Bots 2 did.
I was going to say,
I was just thinking about that. Just without the celebrity sponsorship, thank you.
It was an interesting dynamic, and I really liked the way that they did it. It's just it was filled with other general rubbish.
The fights were good.
The fights were good. The teams were good. The rest of it, but I like that idea of having, team selections. What I would also say is they've got to select certain things to be in their team. So you've got to have a good Axebot, you've got to have a good Flipper, you've got to have this, that, and the other to have in your team. And that would work quite well, I think.
Can't turn up with maybe 5 verts, something like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of verts, Ian Danger Miller said no more generic vertical spinner bots as rookies. Rookie bots should be novel. I do agree to a degree, because obviously, he mentioned, Riptide was one of the highest ranking newcomers. There was themselves and Blip. Obviously, Blip is part of Seems Reasonable, who've been participating in BattleBots for a while. I do agree to a point, because I agree in a sense that every bot should be different. There shouldn't be 2 things like looking exactly the same. I know there's X number of verts in the field, but they all have their own kind of unique gimmicks. Like, for example, Hypershock is really fast and it has the run around and end game. Okay, it's probably more based vert if you like, but for me, again, it's somewhat limited. If you get selected, like ultimately, you should be able to build what you like. And if you get accepted with generic egg beater, which not Riptide isn't necessarily, but like it's the most based egg beater we've seen in BattleBots since the show's come back. Mm-hmm. It's 4-wheel drive. It's very much bite force, but with an egg beater instead of a bar. And if you get accepted with that, then hey, good for you. That's you get to go and play. It's kind of tough to kind of box someone in terms of if a team wants to build a certain way, then they can do. For me, I don't know.
Yeah, I think BattleBots are sort of starting to lean away from accepting as many 4-wheel drive vertical spinners. Like, I think they do want some more variety in their field. That said, there are still a lot of them about, but I mean, these are already teams that have made names for themselves in the sport, and they've got the sort of ownership of those names, and they are, as I said earlier, marketable, and people know them. But you look at the newcomers we had this year, we had, Switchback, who was, yes, a vertical spinning drum, but had it on an articulating arm, making it somewhat different. We had Riptide, a based egg beater. We've not really seen the like in BattleBots. We've had, a few egg beaters before, but nothing quite the shape and size of Riptide. It's more akin to a sort of beetle weight. And then you've got such things as... Who else was new? Glitch. Glitch was a vertical spinner again, but used omnidirectional drive to make it somewhat
X-Drive,
different. Yeah,
specifically.
X-Drive, nice.
Super interesting.
There's another robot that was meant to be there, Ominous, which is much the same, but using Omni wheels to maneuver. I think if you
that was holonomic, or no, not holonomic. It might have been. It was the Y-shaped drive, which was odd.
You're using big words. I'm not going to nod. The thing I think is most important is that if you are going to accept these vertical spinners, have them be unique ones. So I wouldn't say no to them, but your
that's
more
some
base
kind of
ones.
catch.
The only one that was sort of basic 2-wheel drive vertical spinner was Dragon Slayer, but it looked cool, and it was a nice theme and a nice design, and they had to go through several revisions to get that in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Moving on, I mean, I think there's just kind of a lot of feedback around number of fights. People want to see more than 8 fights in an episode. I would say that ties into give all bots 3 qualifying fights, right? Mm-hmm. Can we just cram more fights in? How do we cram more fights in? We got really a pretty interesting comment from Caleb Kempson, just saying, get rid of the fight night format entirely. It can be manipulated way too easily. Why do you give an 0-2 bot a third fight? They're not going to make it in. And, why are we okay with, advancing a 2-0 bot but forcing other robots to fight for 3 times? There's just challenges around the number of fights and how the qualifiers are structured. Is there a better way to structure the qualifiers? Can we get more fights in? Can we film more fights? Is that possible?
I wonder if you offered everyone 2 fights and then say if you want to attempt to get a higher placement in seeding, you can go for a third fight. You can put your name down for that. If you lose it, you get a lower seeding than you would get at 2-0. Yeah.
Speaking of seedings, what about a transparent ranking system for these robots? Why is it just this one's good, that one's good? Why not something more concrete? I know we have bot rank, and we could talk about that a whole nother time. But something that's more concrete where you can say, okay, such and such a robot is ranked, let's say 4th, and here's a newcomer, and they wipe the floor with them, and you're like, oh my gosh, holy crap! So you'd give them an ELO rank or something like that, or something like what they do in esports, where you have a new team come in that just blows people out of the water, or maybe a team that just was good maybe a couple of years ago and they're starting to fall off the cliff a little bit. There needs to be more of that, I think. I feel like we're playing too much to favorites on teams, and maybe that's on production, and that's maybe more to bring in eyes. I mean, it is a TV show at the end of the day. This is where we start to blur the line between TV show and competition. But I feel like that might benefit a little bit, maybe with a transparent ranking system. For
one of the things that drove me nuts about the seeding this year was you have 3-0 bots. They're at the top. They should be at the top. That makes sense. But you've got 2-0 bots that they just stuck right in the middle. And you're like, all those 2-0 bots could be 3-0 bots. You didn't give them the chance, right? You can't deny someone a third fight and then penalize them in the seedings. Yeah. It's not fair. Strength of schedule. Not everybody had the same strength of schedule in the qualifiers. There were definitely robots that had easier paths to the top 32, and they got amazing seedings at no fault of their own. It's not like they ask, oh, can I please have easy fights, right? It just happened that way. That's the way it shook out. And having a more transparent seeding system, a more transparent ranking system, like you say, Steve, would be really great. I personally suspect my favorite BattleBots conspiracy theory is that they just choose which fights they think would look good in the top 32, and then they just give you whatever seeding it needs to be. Oh, you're a 12, but I'm going to give you a 15 so that you can fight this other robot that we really want to see.
We've storylines.
Yeah, ultimately, the longer these teams compete, the more storylines and the more storied their kind of line of fights becomes. For example, I think the one that maybe you could be alluding to a little bit maybe is P1 and Hypershock this year is a great example of that, because of course of surrounding last year, they probably should have had a play in last year because P1 missed out on the bracket, Hypershock got in, much to Jefferson's joy.
Where you give them a a fight night fight of that instead
and
of
not a tournament fight.
Tournament fight.
But then they only had two so they only had two fight night fights, and would their third fight have been each other? Which
I think it's no mistake that Endgame was pitched up to either play Minotaur, a robot who's beaten them,
or
Bloodsport, a robot who's beaten them.
That happened in quite a few quarters as well, because Ribot would have ended up fighting. Well, had they beaten Hydra, would have ended up fighting Black Dragon, who beat them, and Mad Catter, who beat them. So
either that, or would have fought Defender in a rematch.
All the little dots.
I don't know.
Those tinfoil hatters out there are going to be losing their heads right now.
And we can talk about with shortened film schedule too. I mean, it's kind of hard to be. It's kind of tough to be extra hard on this season because of the way that the filming schedule shook out. But we've already harped on that.
I think Caleb mentioned a double elimination bracket, which I like. It just, for me, it requires having an even numbered field and then having alternates as well, which I'm not a massive fan of. I like the fact that, any team could have X number of fights instead of okay, you have to have a field of 64 or 32 or whatever, you have to have a certain number of teams, whereas, with this, 70 teams can turn up and you'll get 3 fights, and then,
I think the biggest issue is that we've had the fight night format misused and abused. And that it needs to be better structured and have fights that make sense.
Producer interference, but this is basically producer.
If you've got 2-0 bots, make them fight. If you've got 1-on-1 bots, make them fight. This is the sort of matchups we need to be seeing. Not and 3 seasons ago, Sawblaze fought X robot and was defeated. Now can they make a comeback? Yes, it's a cool storyline.
Yeah, but such and such robot needs a third fight. Who can they fight that's available? Oh,
Rusty.
Here you go. Rusty. Sorry, guys.
I think that ties quite nicely to the next thing, which said stop giving struggling top tier bots easy wins to secure their spot in the round of 32. It was noticeable this season.
Yeah. I think also a lot of this could be solved with tying in that point that we made earlier about the regionality of teams, right?
Yes.
If you have a bot that for some reason is absolutely destroying Brazil's team, or if there is an Asian team coalition, that's a great way to establish those rivalries, without having to forcibly institute something into a story, right? And to overproduce something. That's the bullet that could hit the other speeding bullet that would solve a lot of these pain points.
Have you guys watched any of Kenny Florian's other job, the Professional Fighters League?
I haven't, personally.
I have not.
All right, so they have a system.
You're the only barbarian among us.
Who enjoys actual combat sports with humans. Yeah, I know. So they have a system where they basically have qualifiers, and the qualifiers are everybody gets 2 fights to attempt to qualify for the tournament. And if you get a win, that's 3 points. If you get a submission, that's 1 point. If you get a knockout, that's 2 points. And so there's additional points that you get throughout all of it. And if you win all of the judging criteria, if you win all of control, you get those points, right? So the people at the end with the highest amount of points are then seeded in that way. There's an objective seeding method that doesn't have to be decided upon by any committee or any group of mysterious people in the back. And that is in my mind, the only way to kind of get rid of the selection committee aspect of BattleBots, which I do think is weird, amorphous, and doesn't really add a lot of value. I would much rather have just see how it plays out. Let's see how it goes. Then we're going to see this obviously high-ranking bot down low because we want to see Rebot fight them. You know what I mean? It just feels, it adds to the credence of it feels fixed. It adds to the credence of it feels fake to people, and I totally see why, because that aspect kind of is.
We've just got a couple more suggestions here before we wrapped up. These two are related. No more play-in matches in the finals. This was kind of a new thing that we saw this year. Let's just do that in the fight night format, and also stop highlighting championship fights. Like if you made it into the championship, your fight should not be on YouTube.
Yeah.
I think those are two relatively uncontroversial positions. Any thoughts on those?
I'm fully into that. Oh yeah, go ahead, Lindsay.
No, go.
You two
Yeah.
can't stop it, can you?
I know, I can't help it. Real quick, I guess I could say that like it goes back onto our topic of these teams are sponsored. And imagine having your team that you sponsor get into the tournament and only have their fight highlighted. I would have a hard time sponsoring said team again if they're going to get played by the show in such a way. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of it. I kind of like sort of like the idea of play-ins in a way, but that's what the fight nights are for. Those are play-ins. I know that well, since this did happen in March Madness also happened. They have something called the First Four, where there's these 4 parts of the bracket where you have 2 teams that are just like right on the cusp of breaking into the tournament. But they're on the bubble, and so they have I almost said they fight. I'm too combat sported up, man. But they play a match, and then whoever wins ends up making the bracket. And usually it's not a very cushy spot. Usually it's like a 12 seed or a 16 or a 15 or something like that. But they make it, so it's not as advantageous to have to play an extra match. But I don't know if they have a place here. This is also probably a deal where like it came down to bots only getting 2 fights, which is strange because Defender got 4. So yeah, I'll let you go, Lindsay, before I start to trail.
Yeah, I mean, I think like everybody else, I think highlighting round of 32 matches is basically inexcusable. I don't hate the play-ins, but what I do think is funny is that like had there not been play-ins, Hydra would not have been in the bracket. And so for all the folks who are like, oh, it's rigged against Hydra, like they just don't want Hydra to win. They like basically created the play-ins so that Hydra would have a place in the bracket. Yep. So like miss me with those conspiracies. I think it's really silly. To me, like the play-ins seem like, oh, we like some of these bots. They didn't quite make the cut. Let's find a way to get them in because we want them there.
Yeah, it's another case of the same as what happened last year to P1. Kind of happened to Defender this year as the only 2-1 bot to not get a place in the tournament bracket, and them allowing 1 and 2 bots to take those places instead because they are high profile. I think that the likes of Scorpios who did go 1 and 2 but had 2 main events, that's a strength of schedule that you go, there's a position for you. A robot that has lost to a rookie and lost to the champion is kind of, the champion loss is somewhat excusable, the loss to the rookie less so if you're a big name, and so better luck next year. As far as play-ins go, I've been, I think, vocal about my dislike for things like Desperado tournaments we've had in the past, because it has no stakes. If you lose at the Desperado tournament, you're allowed just back into the regular competition and can still make it through another set of play-ins. 2019 was a bit of a mess, but the play-ins we've had recently just feel very forced as well. Not the biggest fan of them, but I think potentially correct robots made it in certain areas, others didn't. It just creates a mess, and it's sloppy and needs to be tighter, really.
Jesse Mullen had a really interesting point, and he said, if you're paying attention as a super fan, you will notice that the person who wins the giant nut never has a fight go to YouTube. So through the process of elimination, over the course of 10 weeks, you can eliminate 20 robots, even top tier robots. So like the second that Whiplash got their fight relegated, their championship fight relegated to YouTube, you can say Whiplash isn't winning this year. Nope. And like if you're paying attention, like that to be true, which is just horrifically bad for this is a true sport. Like this is a real sport and anybody can win, because you know, like especially if we started like betting on this,
Yeah,
people would just be like,
it gets to become very Mickey Mouse very quickly.
yes, right. And oh yeah, I'm going to relegate it to YouTube because it's just too difficult of a story for us to tell, and it ultimately didn't even affect the giant nets. So whatever, let's just put it in onto YouTube instead, which is a real shame. All right, final two suggestions on a very long but delightful show.
And then we get to go have a drink.
Yes. You know, instead of just first place finisher, do a podium finish for 1, 2, and 3. I love that.
It's been so frustrating for years that we haven't had third place playoffs.
I know.
Why are there no?
There's that Robot Wars connection again.
I know.
Why is it we're getting episodes of BattleBots where we're already reduced to 8 episodes and the final is reduced to 7? We could easily have an 8th fight in there and it be the third place playoff between.
You can put that on YouTube if you want to.
Yep,
just say,
fine.
Say
afterwards.
Or just say that, you know, on YouTube is the third place playoff. No one would mind. Everyone would be like, okay, cool. We get to see an extra fight of, you know, a championship caliber machine, but you know, we get to see 2 of them on YouTube, which is great. Like, you know, you don't get that normally.
I'm also going to pipe up and say it's a crime that we didn't get the awards announced on the show this year.
I think they're being announced later on.
It's still a crime that we didn't get them awarded on the show.
On the real show, on the actual one. You just talked about having your sweet pudding, but your terrible main course.
Instead, we had a load of filler that wasn't necessary to...
A lot of bread.
Yeah. Filled up on bread, not enough.
Hey.
I'm not taking anything
bread
away
is
from bread.
delicious.
I'm not taking anything away from it. I love bread. I can eat it. I can literally eat it forever.
You fill up on bread.
We don't need to be throwing bread under the bus right now.
You fill up on bread. You don't want the main course.
I'm Italian. I live on bread. Pasta. Fish.
The final suggestion from the fans comes from Mario Cast from Texas. Thank you, Mario, for sending it in. Saying, for the final fight of the season, there should be no time limit. There should be no count out. It should just go for 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes until total incapacitation. Steve is raising his hand.
Yeah,
Steve?
I have a question. Are you going to put like recharge stations in the box? How are they going to keep going? Is it just to the point where like you have like imagine you have a fight? But the thing is, imagine you have a fight like Retrograde and Defender, where it's not as offensively active. You just have these bots mashing into each other over and over and over again. Where's the end game?
I have one point.
The batteries get puffy. They start burning.
Yeah,
like you have this.
Both robots are on fire.
Pyrrhic victory. You know, like it'd be incredible.
Yeah.
So my point is, in the now 6 seasons of BattleBots that we've had since the show came back, how many finals have actually gone to the judges?
1. 2? 2.
No, there's 1.
2015. Did
that was
2018 not go to the judges as well?
Minotaur
Minotaur got wrecked. The only one that went to the judges was the very first reboot season.
So, with that said, there's only been 1 ever that's gone to the judges, and that was because we had a control button, a tombstone that just stopped.
Yeah.
Had tombstone kept working, I imagine the fight probably would have gone the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually. Because Bite Force was pretty damaged in that. So, I feel like we already have that. Like, normally we're going to get a final anyway that's going to be a knockout, because, I know it doesn't normally happen, but like even then, like they could keep going until it does. But
it's a very video game-esque idea.
I like it though. I like the premise of it. Like it's a there will be no judge decision. There will be a outright winner. But like the thing is, we've already had that for the last however many years anyway.
Yeah.
So
what we were talking about this week was how we find most of the BattleBots finals to be somewhat anticlimactic compared to their semi-final fights, because the semi-finals are always absolute barnstormers, and then the final is usually sort of 1 or 2 hits and then it's done. And
I don't know. The 2018 and 2019 ones were both pretty fire. Honestly, Bite Force Minotaur was awesome.
2020 and 2021 was sort of, and 2016 kind of
one-way traffic.
One-way traffic, yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'm fine with the direction the traffic is going. But yeah.
Yeah. I don't really see there's much difference to what we already have, but it is what it is.
Fantastic suggestions from the fans. This has
Definitely.
been great. I don't know. Like,
I've loved this.
let's send the transcript to Greg and Trey. I mean, like, we fixed BattleBots.
Yeah.
Took us less than 2 hours. That's great, you know?
And we'll have our checks, sent out to.
They don't pay the builders. They're not going to pay us, Sam. Come on now.
It was worth a try.
That bit hit the cutting room floor harder than the Wall Street crash, I think.
Yeah. Honestly, I know it's been said already, but I've really enjoyed doing this, and it's good to kind of like get a. It's weird that we've just spoken a little bit previously to this, but like the fact that we're just very aligned on a lot of things just kind of surprised me quite a lot. And the fact that we are ultimately we all love BattleBots. We all love.
We're one fandom under one roof.
Exactly, and ultimately, we just want what's best for the show that we have, and it's our and differing opinions aside, a lot of people have had their opinions, kind of read out and kind of put to the fore. Like ultimately, we all want what's best for our crazy little hobby that we enjoy, and it's very cool to kind of chat it through with you guys. You guys definitely push us to kind of improve ourselves and make ourselves put out better quality. I've just punched my desk. Put out better quality.
So ironic that you said better
Something
quality
later.
at that point, isn't it?
It's true, but you get what I mean. Like we strive to be as clean cut as you guys are. Producing an amazing podcast, and thank you for coming and talking with us. It's been great fun.
And you've inspired us to show our faces on a
There you go.
video format.
They're also beautiful.
Except Kyle, but we're gonna edit him.
Yeah,
in
we'll
post.
get Kyle.
Thanks so much. This has been so much fun.
Yeah.
Same
We
time
should
next
do this
season.
every season.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Post-season party.
Mhm.
Well, from our end at least, with all that said, I have been Sam Elliott 64.
I've been Steve the American Killjoy.
I have been World of Woodrow.
And
Good luck.
we've been other people.
There you go.
That'll
That'll
do.
do.
That'll do
You're
it.
more than just other people.
It would be a complete mess if we went through one by one, I'm sure. Thank you very much for coming and joining us, and thank you everyone for all your suggestions. A lot of them were very similar from both sides of our thing where we posted out. So apologies if you didn't get your name read out, but we did go through them all, and they were literally one for one exactly the same. So we've just kind of brought it all under one umbrella.
Yeah.
But with that said, we'll see you at some point for more BattleBots action.
Yeah.
We'll see you then.